Sarah Eisen from The Australian. I just wanted to speak to the Misinformation Bill and particularly the exemptions that we might see there. We have seen in the last sort of week some talk about there being religious exemptions. Can you clarify what that would mean if someone says something that is part of a religious belief, then that might be kind of carved out from a platform needing to take that down? And also, can you be clear if you will retain the exemption for political parties within a Misinformation Bill?
Well, as to your first question, we are working through these issues now as part of the consultation process. But it is a point that has been raised by several submitters. And again, I thank all the submitters who've taken the time to express their views on this issue. So we will work through precisely what those exemptions will be, but we understand that there has been concern from a variety of faith organisations that their religious views should not be considered as part of this rubric. So we are working through that at the moment and we'll have more to say in due course. There have been calls for exemptions, in fact, to be removed, including when it comes to authorised election material and also as it applies to media services as well. I've made it clear that those exemptions are in there for a reason. It's because they are regulated elsewhere under different standards and under other laws. But in terms of any other exemptions, we will work through those as part of this consultation process. We have a large number of people who have made very detailed submissions, and we appreciate that, and we'll work through this.
So you're open to removing the exemption for political parties, not just electoral, but political parties being exempt from this? Are you open to removing that exemption?
Well, let me be clear, and if you're talking in particular about notices that can be given by government, which has been a source of contention, I want to be clear that that exemption was proposed to ensure that important emergency and otherwise official information from government that is important to people wasn't taken down or removed by digital platforms. We understand that that has been the subject of some misinterpretation. We want to get this drafting right, and we want to ensure that this reflects the proper intent, which is to hold the digital platforms to account for the policies, systems and processes that they have signed up to and they've already committed to.
Thank you.
Ron Misen.
Minister, thank you for your speech and congratulations on your first Press Club appearance. There's been reporting earlier this year and also last week about both yourself, Mr Albanese, attending various events with gambling industry lobbyists. I just want to ask you, those events have been organised by the Federal Labor Business Forum, at which organisations pay a subscription fee for various levels of access. Do you as a minister have a choice about whether you attend those events, or are you required to?
I very much appreciate your question. It gives me the opportunity to acknowledge that there is a large amount of community concern in this area about the impacts of gambling and gambling advertising more generally, which I have covered in my address. I'd like to say from the outset that I have at all times and will continue to comply with all rules in relation to disclosure and donations, that every Member of Parliament must comply with this and every political party must comply with this. I intend to continue participating in fundraising activities and also meeting with a wide variety of stakeholders relevant to my portfolio. But at all times will I continue to comply with those disclosure requirements. I made an announcement earlier this year that I would no longer accept donations or hospitality from gambling companies. I have adhered to that promise and will continue to do so in future. I will also point out that in 18 months, the Albanese government has delivered more in terms of gambling reform and harm minimisation than any government before it, including the launch of BetStop, including banning the use of credit cards for online wagering, which actually passed the House of Representatives recently, and enacting the final provisions of the National Consumer Protection Framework. We have proof points that demonstrate our commitment and our delivery when it comes to harm minimisation. On the broader issue of donations and disclosure more generally, I know that my colleague, Minister Farrell, is undertaking an important piece of work in this area through JSCEM and is open to all ideas about how we can further improve democracy in this country.
Can I just clarify, is it voluntary or is it a requirement upon ministers to attend those events?
I choose to attend such events. I will continue to attend fundraising events, but I will always do so in accordance with donations and disclosure requirements. All political parties are required to do the same, and I think it is important to recognise the piece of work being undertaken by the government right now in order to update the rules that govern our democracy and make any changes that are deemed necessary to make it stronger.
Thank you.
Despite setting a very bad precedent, if I could ask you all to stick to one question so we can get through a lot more. Ben Westcott.
Ben Westcott from Bloomberg. Thank you very much for your speech, Minister. You've spoken in your speech about online gambling ads, and you said you're going to undertake consultation on it and look into it. But I mean, anyone who has been on YouTube recently will have been deluged with ads from a range of gambling services. You've already mentioned some of the harm minimisation measures you've undertaken. Why is this a complicated reform from your perspective? Why can't we just ban gambling ads online?
Thank you for your question. And it's one that is often proposed. It's one that is used in relation to, for example, the banning of tobacco ads many years ago. The reality is, again, as I outlined in my speech, over the years, the gambling industry and sport, for example, the relationship has very much changed. We know that the impact of gambling ads is felt right across the community, and the committee made some very important recommendations in that regard. In answer to your question, I'm consulting closely with a wide range of stakeholders because we need to understand the impacts in this area, but also what changes need to be made in order for it to be more robust in future. I would point out that the last substantive time that this was amended, actually under the Turnbull government, actually resulted in an increase in gambling advertising. So we need to ensure that we get the policy settings right. But I can assure you that we are at all times guided by the principles of harm minimisation. We're consulting widely with a range of experts in this area. We understand the community concern. I've made it clear that the status quo cannot continue, and we will have more to say on this in due course.